So from my understanding of IV, it ultimately just boils down to sales and being able to sell yourself, sell whatever acquisition you have.
M&A, yeah, I'd say so.
And so when you're trying to sell whatever acquisition you have to said buyers, it gets in bidding wars and whatnot where you have multiple buyers and they may be offering different, quantitative, like, just different amounts of money, different, financials overall, but then you have to weigh the qualitative as well, where you're looking at, how credible the buyer is and, what they're going to do with the company. How do you weigh that when it comes to a deal and you're like looking at a deal objectively and weighing these qualitative quantities?
So I just want to make sure I've interpreted the question correctly. So you're saying essentially you've got multiple bids. How do you segregate the bids and prioritize them?
Right, like based on, because like, they may be offering different amounts of money, but maybe somebody's going to break down a company for parts and the other one.
That's a really good question.
Something like that.
So we put together something we call an EV, which stands for Enterprise Value Comparison Matrix. And so let's say on one end of the extreme, you've got an all-cash offer. On the other end of the extreme, you have an all-earn-out offer. Let's say the earn-out offer is for $1 billion, but you have to perform Herculean feats that are unachievable to get it. And the all-cash offer, it's less. And so we take risk weighting and adjustment into these offers plus time value of money. There's typically 3 levers: cash at close, number 1, then equity roll and earn-out. There could be notes and other things involved too, but those are the typical 3 levers. And so for cash at close, I mean, you could compare one to the next. So now what you're really talking about is in an equity roll, so a strategic won't give you that, a financial will. How likely are you to actually achieve the result? Usually what you're targeting is something like a 3-to-1. So for every dollar I roll, if I have to wait 5 years, I want to see $3 on the back end for that or more. And so then the question becomes, how long is your runway? If the private equity group's portco, and that's usually if you're rolling equity, what would be rolled into, if you're not the platform, if you're the bolt-on. So we'll use that as the example. And then the question is are they late in their hold period, in which case I have, let's say, a year-long runway, or are they early in their hold period? So if they have a year or so in their runway, I probably don't want to roll equity. But if they have 4 or 5 years, I might, depending on who the PE is. So now the question is, not all PEs are created the same. So let's say somebody like an Insight Ventures is going to be way more credible and have a much further track record than somebody like John's fundless sponsor. I just got a PPM put together, and I decided to call myself a fund, and I just want to be like an owner-operator. And so that's one where you're not going to take those. We don't even go to fundless sponsors, by the way, but that would be an example of like somebody who you would prioritize low. But really what you're doing is you're looking at the 3 levers, you're assuming all these buyers are funded sponsors, which again, fundless sponsors don't even get a teaser. But then you're comparing the likelihood of how much earn-out, how much the value is, one to the other. And usually what happens is, imagine a standard bell curve. So the same way a professor might grade students, you'll have some that are just bad that you wonder why they bothered. You'll have others that are so good, you wonder why anybody else even came to the race. And then you'll have a bunch in the middle, and that's why you perform a regression analysis, and so they all regress towards the mean. And so that would be kind of your C student or your C offer. But ultimately what we do is, first we have the IOIs, and we see kind of what our distribution looks like. Once we have the IOIs, we're going to have, like in pro golf, you'll have a cut. Some make the cut, some don't. So we'll give everybody kind of a chance to say, look, your offer is not competitive relative to some of the more top-of-market offers we've received. We'll invite you to increase your offer. Some will, some won't. And for the ones that don't, we thank you very much. We hope to catch you on the next one. We really appreciate the time invested so far. But it's just not efficient for either of us to continue the conversation at this point. So we'll catch you next time. And so you'll eliminate usually down to the top 3, 4, or 5, depending on just how many management meetings the seller and their team have the appetite to entertain. And so once we're in the management meetings, that's where you'll see the real separation occur. Some will drop for whatever reason. Maybe it's your idea, maybe it's their idea. But what you're looking to ultimately achieve is exclusivity with the top buyer. And some that's really hard for. I'll give you an example. There was a company I sold about a year ago called Heartland IT. They're an Oracle company. Did a lot of work in Fusion, which is the cloud product, which is a lot of growth. But then they did some legacy on-prem stuff like e-business solutions, JD Edwards, PeopleSoft, that kind of thing. And we got 14 offers for that company. But when you boiled it down, there was only like 4 good ones. So imagine the bell curve. So we had a bunch of C and below students. So now we wanted to focus our time on the A and B students, and even the B students were kind of like So we had 3 that were all right there, and ultimately the seller decided to go with the one where just he knew the guy, he felt most comfortable there. They're all pretty equivalent, and so that's where it's. And I'll go. So that's just one example. I'll give you another example. There was another company. There's a publicly listed company in China called BeyondSoft. They're kind of like the Accenture of China, and they have a very, very harsh work culture. And so we've sold companies to BeyondSoft, and they've also bid for companies where they've been the #1 bidder, but we didn't sell to them. And I'll just give you the quote. So the seller said, look, there's not enough money difference, and it was like a 20% difference. It was millions and millions of dollars. It's like, by the time I pay my taxes and fees and my therapist, and clean up all the bloodstains on the carpets from the 3 years I have to be with this company, there's just not enough in the world worth it to me to go with those guys. So it's not just about the buck. And when I was a junior, I used to think highest bid wins. It does not. Very often cases, the bid where the soft factor is also like I like this team. I could see myself working with these guys. This culture is similar to my culture that I built here. That all matters. And very often cases, the silver medalist is the one running off into victory lane. So, great question though.
Anybody else?